Because women in science have the power to change the world, discover Women in Science, presented by the L'Oreal Foundation.
The woman leading the procession through the streets of Durban is one of the most prominent scientists in South Africa, Professor Quarraisha Abdool Karim. That day, April 22, 2017, she was taking part in the Great Universal March to defend research and to fight against scientific disinformation.
Long live science! Long live!
Quarraisha is a committed scientist. This epidemiologist is known throughout the world for her research into the spread of AIDS in a country decimated by the disease, where 6.5 million people live with HIV. That's more than 1 in 10 inhabitants, the world record. Quarraisha focuses her work on the most vulnerable group, young women.
The root cause of these challenges are actually gender power differences in society. But our work as scientists is to try and find technologies that women can use to prevent HIV infection, with especially those women who are unable to negotiate the traditional safer sex practices.
Back in 2002, South Africa was in total denial of the epidemic. It fell to Quarraisha to shake up certain ideas. With her scientist husband Salim, the pioneer founded Quarraisha, a research program into AIDS especially devoted to South Africa. That day she was heading to Vulindlela, 60 kilometers from Durban, a village with a certain notoriety because close to 40% of this rural community is infected with HIV. Each year, the number of contaminated pregnant young women increases by 11%.
The first time I came to this community was in 2001. And I still remember it like yesterday. Young men and women were dying from AIDS.
This is where Quarraisha set up her main research center.
Hi, Getwana. How are you doing?
How are you?
Good.
Quarraisha is welcomed by her staff, scientists, and social mediators.
We can ask you about what some of the participants are saying about particularly women in terms of prevention options.
In most cases, they normally don't have the authority with the partners to communicate with them and negotiate the use of the condoms. So they're quite excited with the fact that we're here.
Every day, the Quarraisha Center welcomes dozens of young women for whom the issue of AIDS is shameful, offering psychological support for those who are infected with HIV, consultations and clinical tests to understand how the virus has spread within this community. Which women are most affected according to socioeconomic factors? Quarraisha has also revolutionized therapy by being the first scientist to give antiretrovirals not only to sick people, but also, preventively, to young non-infected women. Last year, we came to meet Quarraisha at her center in Vulindlela. She was showing these young women the innovation she developed in 2010 and which at the time won a Science Magazine award.
So do you want to see what the gel looks like, smells like? We're going to show some of this gel, and this would be inserted into the vagina. The participants would do this. Yeah.
Almost like a lubricant.
Tenofovir is a vaginal gel based on antiretrovirals. It reduces the risk of HIV transmission to women by 39%. Easy to apply, it allowed them to manage their own protection.
What was significant about that study is it was the first study to demonstrate that the use of antiretrovirals by uninfected people can prevent HIV infection. Groups at high risk, and so they have this ring, these selected.
And prevent it did, but not yet in sufficient quantities. As a result, the gel has since been abandoned, but not the idea of treating those infected with antiretrovirals. A foreign lab took up Quarraisha Abdool Karim's idea and devised a new prevention strategy, administering a daily cocktail of 2 anti-HIV drugs to people at risk. An approach named PrEP, for pre-exposition prophylaxis. Risk is hence reduced to 56%, still not enough in the eyes of the South African authorities to allow it to be marketed. Be that as it may, this therapeutic approach is encouraged by the Quarraisha Center and by Quarraisha herself.
We've been able to actually demonstrate. So we're doing the demonstration project at this clinic, as well as our clinics in the peri-urban communities in Durban and in the city center. And this data, what we're trying to do now is take the tablets and integrate it into sexual reproductive health services.
At the dispensary, we met Patricia, a young woman of 27. She had lost both her parents to AIDS. HIV negative but high risk, she explained why she was following the treatment.
I don't know where the boys or my boyfriend goes. That's why I'm using that PrEP, and he was helping me.
Quarraisha is also involved in changing attitudes and educating high school students, mainly the young girls who are most vulnerable to HIV. A partnership with the schools in the Vulindlela community was set up with the aim of better prevention through education. Gathwana Malaz, who has worked with Quarraisha since 2002, regularly visits schools to speak frankly of the dangers of AIDS.
What do you know about HIV?
Condom.
We can use a condom?
Yes.
Okay.
There are pills that we get from Quarraisha that helps you not to get HIV easily.
Okay, good.
You may not do sex at all.
Oh, you may not do sex at all.
To succeed in her fight against ignorance, Quarraisha the epidemiologist works hand in hand with a high school principal.
This is important for us as a school to start teaching them as early as possible. Start as early as grade 8, so that they may also come out and spread the word through all the community.
On the way back to Durban, Quarraisha Abdool Karim, who was of Indian origin, tells us about her childhood in the land of apartheid. She grew up in Tongaat, an Indian city to the north of Durban. After school, she studied science at the University of Durban-Westville on the campus reserved for students of Indian origin. There, she discovered the harsh realities of segregation.
That helped me understand on a day-to-day basis what it meant to be black and what it meant not to have access to services, what it meant to have in the middle of the night security forces arriving and shooting people randomly. So there was a lot of things around the reality of living, which later shaped how I would do my research.
In 1988, Quarraisha decided to go to the United States to do her master's at Columbia University. There she met Zina Stein and Mervyn Susser, two South African epidemiologists in exile from the apartheid regime, and they became her mentors.
So in fact, what I had was two parallel lives, the one where I was being a scientist in the day, and then in the evening and the weekends, where I was looking at how I can bring about change in South Africa. And in Mervyn and Zina, I learned about epidemiology, which is both a science, but also has a social justice component to it.
And so Quarraisha has understood not just the biology of transmission, but the psychosocial and economic events that make this perpetual cycle so difficult to break. And I think being able to articulate it and to understand both the biology and the social drivers of transmission in this way makes her a spectacular scientist and makes her discoveries and the things that she's going to do so unique and so profound for South Africa.
That morning, Quarraisha invited us to her home in Durban for a family breakfast with two of her 3 children and her husband, Salim, also a famous researcher. Before meeting, neither had worked on AIDS. He was a hepatitis B specialist, but after marrying, they decided to stand together in the fight against AIDS.
But I've got 2 types of...
So now, 28 years later, ask me what it's like, and I'll tell you, well, it's been a terrific partnership. Had we not married, had we launched HIV research careers independently of each other, I don't think we would have had half the discoveries that we have had in the last 8 years.
Aisha and Wasim are their 2 youngest children. She is 22 and hopes to become a science journalist. He is 18 and studying at the University of Cape Town. Their childhood memories are of a mother passionate about research, often hurrying to catch a flight, but always there when needed.
So much so that I'm looking to study something very similar. I think the end goal is to help as many people as we can.
It's just the way that she approaches life and the way that she constantly wants to help make people's lives better. I think that's the most admirable quality about her.
In Durban, in the Quarraisha laboratories, part of the Nelson Mandela Medical School, Quarraisha is working on new solutions to fight the spread of AIDS. Her most promising discovery could revolutionize the treatment of AIDS. She has succeeded in identifying and isolating antibodies capable of neutralizing HIV and blocking its replication. By the detailed study of more than 500 women in 13 years, Quarraisha identified a patient who developed this incredibly powerful antibody.
We've been able to manufacture in by isolating and making large enough quantities and testing those preclinically. We're now going to be ready early next year to start the clinical studies to test whether if we provide these antibodies twice a year to humans who are at risk of getting infected, will it offer them protection?
This new trajectory naturally raises hopes not just for South Africa, whose lifeblood is still being sapped by the scourge of AIDS, but also for the whole of humanity. As a self-respecting scientist, Quarraisha Abdool Karim won't hazard a guess as to when we might see a potential vaccine against AIDS.
Until we have ended AIDS by finding a vaccine or a cure, then I think my job is not done.
Women in Science was presented by the L'Oreal Foundation.